A video is trending right now showing an aerial drone shot of a building so large it looks like a stadium from above. It has 10-story sections, cranes still working on it, and a footprint that stretches across land the size of a small town. Nigerians are sharing it everywhere, asking the same question in the comments. What is this and who is paying for it? The answer is the Ark, a 109,000-seat church auditorium being built by Bishop David Oyedepo's Winners Chapel inside Canaanland in Ogun State. And before I go any further, I need to be completely honest with you about something. This is not new. This project was first announced in 2015. The groundbreaking happened in March 2021. It is now 2026 and construction is still ongoing. The video going viral today is not breaking news. It is simply the latest glimpse of a project that has been under construction for 5 years and in planning for 11. Here's the number that should stop you. Over 160 billion naira. That is the reported cost of a single church auditorium in a Nigerian state currently locked in a bitter governorship battle, in a country where we have already shown you on this channel that 8 billion naira allocated to churches and mosques in the national budget generated national outrage. 160 billion naira is 20 times that entire controversial budget line spent on one building by one church. Today, we are going to walk through exactly what the Ark is, what Bishop Oyedepo says about how it is funded, and connect it directly to a question Nigeria has been avoiding for years. What does it mean when private religious wealth on this scale exists inside a state and a country where public infrastructure struggles to get built at all? Stay with me. If you are new to the Policy Pulse HQ, this channel connects the dots other channels rush past. Subscribe now. Watch the full breakdown here on this channel. This short only gave you half the story. And stay with me, because this is not just about one church. It is about the pattern we have been tracking on this channel all year. Every verified detail about the project. Let us establish exactly what has been reported and confirmed about this project, because the scale of it deserves precision, not exaggeration. The Ark, originally announced in 2015 under the name Faith Theatre, is a megachurch auditorium under construction at Canaanland, the headquarters campus of Living Faith Church Worldwide, popularly known as Winners Chapel in Ogun State. Groundbreaking took place in March 2021. As of the most recent reporting, from March 2026, the structure is designed to seat approximately 109,000 people in its main auditorium alone, with an additional 20,000 capacity children's church sitting on roughly 1,000 hectares of land. If completed as designed, it would become the largest church auditorium in the world, surpassing Winners Chapel's own existing Faith Tabernacle, which currently seats around 50,000 people, and was itself once the world record holder before being overtaken by Dunamis International Gospel Center's Glory Dome in Abuja. The project also includes a mission tower, originally planned as 12 floors, later expanded to 20 and in some reports 24 floors, intended to serve as the church's international headquarters. The total cost has been consistently reported across multiple outlets at over 160 billion naira, which at various points in reporting has been valued at approximately 110 to 200 million US dollars, depending on the exchange rate at the time of each report. The dedication date has moved repeatedly. It was originally targeted for completion within 3 years of the 2021 groundbreaking. It was then scheduled for November 29, 2025. Bishop Oyedepo announced in November 2025 that the dedication would be pushed to 2026, specifically citing logistics and specialized equipment challenges, not financial constraints, as the reason for the delay. The self-funding claim examined fairly. Before we move to the harder questions, let us be fair and precise about what Bishop Oyedepo himself has said regarding funding, because this matters enormously for how we should evaluate this project. According to multiple reports, Bishop Oyedepo has stated explicitly that members of Living Faith Church worldwide would not be taxed to contribute specifically toward the Ark project. Reports indicate that approximately 45 billion naira had already been released toward the project by the time of earlier coverage, out of the full 160 billion naira budget. In his November 2025 update explaining the delay, Oyedepo stated directly, quote, "We are not looking for money or asking for money from anywhere. We have all that is needed," end quote. If that claim is accurate and there is no public evidence directly contradicting it, then this project differs meaningfully from a scenario where a religious institution is actively soliciting mandatory contributions from a struggling congregation to fund a monument. Living Faith Church Worldwide is one of the largest and most financially established religious organizations in Africa, with millions of members across 147 countries, extensive commercial holdings, and decades of accumulated institutional wealth. A project funded from that accumulated institutional base is a materially different situation from one funded through pressured tithing specifically earmarked for construction. Why self-funding does not end the conversation. Here is why, even taking Oyedepo's self-funding claim at face value, this does not actually resolve the underlying question this video is asking. Whether the 160 billion naira comes from mandatory member contributions or from decades of accumulated institutional wealth, it is still 160 billion naira that exists inside the same Nigerian economy and the same Ogun State, where public services, infrastructure, healthcare, and education remain chronically underfunded. The question is not simply where did this specific money come from. The question is what does it say about Nigeria's economic structure that an institution can accumulate and deploy capital at this scale entirely privately, entirely outside government oversight or public accountability mechanisms, while the state apparatus responsible for public goods struggles with far smaller sums. That is not a question about whether Oyedepo did anything improper. It is a question of the structure of wealth and power in Nigeria itself. Why this story belongs next to our 8 billion naira budget coverage. If you watched our earlier video on the 8 billion naira allocated to churches and mosques inside Nigeria's 2026 federal budget, this next part is going to feel very familiar, and I want to walk you through exactly why. In that video, we showed you that Atiku Abubakar, Aisha Yesufu, and even the Northern Christian Elders Forum itself publicly objected to 8 billion naira in public money being directed toward religious infrastructure, arguing that Nigeria's more urgent priorities, security, education, healthcare, deserved that money instead. That was public money. Money collected from Nigerian taxpayers, allocated through a national budget by elected officials accountable, at least in theory, to voters. The Ark is a different category entirely, privately funded religious construction. But sitting the two stories side by side reveals something important about the scale of resources moving toward religious infrastructure in Nigeria overall, through both public and private channels, at a moment when the country's economic indicators, the ones we broke down in our Davido video, 139 million Nigerians in poverty, a 70,000 naira minimum wage, tell an entirely different story about where resources actually are and are not reaching ordinary citizens. The Ogun State political timing that makes this unavoidable. Here is the detail that makes this story impossible to separate from politics, whether Bishop Oyedepo intends it that way or not. This massive project is reaching its final, most visible construction phase and generating viral national attention at the exact moment Ogun State is consumed by one of its most contentious governorship battles in years, the very public war of words between Governor Dapo Abiodun's camp and Iyabo Obasanjo that we flagged as trending in our own research this week. Any structure of this scale, this cost, and this visibility built inside a specific state inevitably becomes entangled with that state's political conversation, regardless of whether the church itself has any political affiliation. Nigerian voters in Ogun State watching this 160 billion naira structure rise from the ground are also the same voters being asked in the same period to evaluate their state government's own record on infrastructure, healthcare, and economic development. Whether fairly or not, comparisons between what a single private religious institution can build and what the state government has delivered over the same multi-year period are politically unavoidable in that specific electoral environment. There is also a labor and local economy dimension worth acknowledging honestly because it complicates a purely critical reading of this story. Reports describing the project have noted that it has generated local jobs and construction activity in the Ota area over its multi-year build. A project of this scale, whatever its ultimate purpose, does inject real economic activity, employment, and local commerce into its immediate surroundings for as long as construction continues. That is a genuine, if partial, counterweight to the argument that this money represents pure economic waste from the perspective of the local community actually living around Canaanland. But local construction jobs during a build phase are fundamentally different from the kind of sustained, broad-based public infrastructure investment, roads, hospitals, schools, that a state government is specifically elected and mandated to deliver using public resources. One does not substitute for the other, and conflating temporary construction employment with genuine public development is a framing worth resisting from either direction, whether used to praise or dismiss this project. Drop a comment right now and tell me honestly, does a privately funded project like this deserve the same scrutiny as the 8 billion naira public budget allocation we covered before, or is this a completely different conversation? I want your honest view. Being fair to Winners Chapel's position, let us present the strongest reasonable case for this project because analytical fairness requires it and because dismissing it outright would ignore genuine, legitimate arguments. Living Faith Church Worldwide is, by any measure, a private religious institution, not a government body. It has no constitutional obligation to fund public infrastructure and no legal requirement to disclose its finances to the Nigerian public the way a government agency spending taxpayer money does. Its members join and contribute voluntarily, and if Oyedepo's claim that members were not specifically taxed for this project is accurate, the funding structure differs meaningfully from a scenario of coerced contribution. There is also a genuine argument about religious infrastructure as legitimate community investment. Winners Chapel operates schools, including Covenant University, one of Nigeria's most respected private universities, alongside various community and social programs. Religious institutions across Nigeria of every faith routinely fill gaps in social infrastructure that government institutions have failed to fill consistently. A megachurch of this scale can be understood by its supporters as consistent with a decades-long pattern of the church investing heavily in its own institutional capacity that has, in other forms, produced genuine educational and social value. Why fair does not mean beyond scrutiny. Here is why. Acknowledging these legitimate points does not mean this story should escape scrutiny entirely. Public scrutiny of how enormous concentrations of wealth are deployed, whether by government, by corporations, or by religious institutions, is a normal and healthy feature of any functioning society, not an attack on religious freedom itself. Nigerians asking questions about a 160 billion naira structure are not questioning Bishop Oyedepo's right to build it. They are exercising the same basic civic instinct that produced the outrage over the 8 billion naira budget allocation, an instinct to ask, in a country with Nigeria's specific economic challenges, whether resources at this scale, wherever they originate, are being deployed in ways that reflect the most urgent needs of the society around them. That is a legitimate public conversation, even about entirely private and entirely legal spending, and it does not require proving any wrongdoing to be worth having. 3 signals worth following. Here is what is worth watching as this project moves toward its eventual completion. The first signal is the actual dedication date. Having already slipped from an initial 3-year target to November 2025, to some point in 2026, Watch whether the project meets its newest timeline or whether further delays emerge, and whether Bishop Oyedepo's stated reason, logistics rather than funding, continues to hold up as the explanation. The second signal is whether Living Faith Church releases any further public detail on the project's finances beyond Oyedepo's own verbal statements, a level of transparency that, while not legally required of a private institution, would meaningfully strengthen public confidence in the self-funding claims currently resting entirely on the bishop's own word. The third signal is how this story continues to intersect with Ogun State's political conversation as the governorship contest between Governor Abiodun's camp and Iyabo Obasanjo intensifies. Watch whether any political figure explicitly references the Ark, positively or critically, as part of that campaign, which would confirm this project has moved from a purely religious story into genuine electoral relevance for the state. Here is where this story leaves us. The Ark is a genuinely extraordinary undertaking. 11 years in the making, 109,000 seats, over 160 billion naira, and, by Bishop Oyedepo's own account, entirely self-funded by one of Africa's largest religious institutions. Whether you view it as a legitimate monument to decades of institutional growth, or as a striking symbol of how differently wealth moves in Nigeria, depending on whether it sits inside government budgets or private religious accounts, one fact remains true regardless of which lens you use. 160 billion naira is a real number, moving through a real Nigerian state at the exact moment that state's own political future and the country's broader economic struggles are dominating the headlines. Nigerians have every right to build, worship, and give as they choose. They also have every right to ask what these numbers tell us about the country they live in. Both things can be true at once, and this video was built to hold them there, honestly, together. If this analysis connected the dots for you between religious wealth and Nigeria's public priorities, share it with one person who needs to see it. Like this video, subscribe to ThePolicyPulseHQ, and tell me in the comments, does a project like this deserve public scrutiny, or is that overreach? I will see you in the next one.